Greetings, this is Jeff Riddle from Christ Reformed Baptist Church in Louisa, Virginia. This is an audio version of a book review that I have written. The book under review was written by Jeffrey D. Johnson. It's titled Behind the Bible, subtitled A Primer on Textual Criticism, published by Solid Ground Christian Books in 2012, and the book is 111 pages in length. My written review first appeared in the Reformed Baptist Trumpet, Volume 3, Number 2, in 2012, and it appeared there on pages 29 through 32. Here now is the review. Behind the Bible is a booklet written by Jeffrey D. Johnson, pastor of Grace Bible Church in Conway, Arkansas, which provides a popular overview and introduction to text-critical study of the New Testament. Perhaps a better title would be Behind the New Testament, since the book does not address the text of the Old Testament. An introduction is provided by Dr. Richard Belcher and a back cover endorsement by apologist James White. Content. After the foreword by Belcher, the book consists of 5 chapters. In Chapter 1, titled A Need for Textual Criticism, Johnson notes the necessity for some grasp of text-critical issues given the modern proliferation of English translations. Chapter 2, titled Paleography, is devoted to, quote, the art and science of dating ancient literature, end quote, page 25. A survey is provided of the writing materials used in the production of biblical texts. Chapter 3 is titled Textual Faithfulness. It reviews the various textual families proposed by modern text criticism. Chapter 4, titled Methods of Textual Criticism, suggests that there have been 2 fundamental approaches to text criticism. One, the documentary method, using one text as the basis, and 2, eclecticism, using many texts as the basis. In Chapter 5, titled The History of the Greek Text, the author provides a survey of various editions of the New Testament from ancient to modern times. The book concludes with a brief appendix on pages 109 to 111, titled Answering Bart Ehrman. Analysis. The importance of text criticism for the modern church is indeed a significant issue, and I commend Pastor Johnson for addressing this topic in a popular format. I found the most engaging parts of the book to be the review of the ancient materials and text-making process. I also appreciated Pastor Johnson's efforts to provide a survey of modern scholarship that resulted in the modern critical text. In the end, however, the booklet has some serious shortcomings. I will address these under 2 headings. First, problems with methodological issues, and 2, problems with factual and editorial issues. First, methodological issues. Johnson uncritically assumes, without ever proving or demonstrating, the validity of the modern critical text as the best basis for English Bible translations for evangelical Christians. He assumes, for example, that the goal of text criticism is the recovery of the original autographs, and assures the reader that with the modern text we can come, quote, very, very close, end quote, in a manner that, quote, does not alter any truth of doctrine, end quote, pages 19 and 20. He assumes various aspects of modern text criticism and passes these along as fact without sufficient discussion, proof, or source citation. Perhaps most significantly, Johnson does not interact with alternative proposals for understanding text criticism, especially as they have been presented in conservative and reformed circles. He does not address the confessional, that is, reformed doctrine of the providential preservation of the Scriptures through the Apocrypha or copies, as found in the Westminster and Second London Baptist Confessions. There is also no discussion of the majority text championed by Farstad, Hodges, and Pickering, or the Byzantine text championed by Robinson. Johnson also makes no reference to the current seismic shifts that have taken place in contemporary postmodern academic New Testament textual criticism, which have essentially resulted in the abandonment of the old modern attempt to reconstruct the original autograph in favor of a construal of a diversity of living texts, so D.C. Parker, or how evangelicals might respond to these shifts. The author appears to have relied on a very limited number of sources. The factual material in the book appears to be especially dependent on summarizing Harold Greenlee's introduction to New Testament text criticism, which, though it has been released in a revised edition, was first published in 1964. Second, factual and editorial issues. In general, I believe this book might be greatly strengthened if it provided more source documentation for the factual material that it presents. I ran across a number of statements that appeared to be speculative, confused, or even erroneous. Here are some examples. First example, on page 37, it says, quote, "It is uncertain whether the uncial or minuscule style was used in autographs in the New Testament. Many scholars believe that Paul's epistles, as personal letters, were written in minuscule," end quote. The chart on page 47, however, points out that the minuscule script was not introduced until the 9th century, replacing the uncial scripts of the earlier centuries. What scholars believe that Paul's letters were written in minuscule in the original hand? Second example, on pages 61 and 62, we find this statement, quote, "None of the early church fathers quoted from the Byzantine text," end quote. This statement is not factually accurate. In fact, Johnson himself refers to the work of Harry Sturtz on these same pages. See footnote 29. Harry Sturtz pointed to Byzantine quotations in the Church Fathers. Third example. On page 76, we find this statement. Quote, "The first New Testament book to be written was the Epistle of James," end quote. Though some scholars, study Bibles, etc., make this suggestion, it remains an unproven and speculative suggestion, not a fact. No argument is put forward for this assertion or footnote provided for an authoritative source to support this claim. Fourth example. On page 78, the assertion is made that the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts were, quote, "transmitted and dispersed together throughout the church in one scroll or codex," end quote. Again, no source is cited for this assertion. It is a speculation. Though Luke and Acts share common Lucan authorship, they are, of course, canonically separated by the Gospel of John. Fifth example. On page 92, we read the following, quote, "The first scripture quotation from a Byzantine text is found in the writings of Chrysostom," end quote. This is, in fact, inaccurate. See again the comments that were made above on the errors on pages 61 and 62. Sixth example. On page 92, we find this statement. The Byzantine text was likely the byproduct of the 50 Bibles published by Eusebius for the church at Constantinople in AD 331, end quote. No source is cited for this assertion. It is an unproven speculation. In fact, in his book, Codex Sinaiticus, the world's oldest Bible, D.C. Parker suggests that Sinaiticus, hardly a Byzantine text, might have been one of the deluxe Bibles ordered by Constantine. Seventh example. On page 105, Johnson says of Westcott and Hort's Greek New Testament, quote, "Their edition of the Greek text is the basis for the Revised Standard Version," end quote. Rather than the RSV of 1946-1952, I assume he meant to say the English Revised Version of 1881. Eighth example. On pages 106 and 107, Johnson suggests that the United Bible Societies are responsible for both the Nestle Aland and the UBS, modern critical Greek texts of the New Testament. Though the texts do agree and there is cooperation between the organizations that publish them, this reference tends to confuse the fact that the Nestle Aland 27th edition is produced by the German Bible Society, the Deutsche Bibelgesellschaft. In addition to addressing factual problems like those cited above, this book would also profit from some editorial revision. Though it is brief, there are unnecessary repetitions. The Ehrman appendix is not adequately developed and might just as well be dropped. The booklet would be improved if it provided more footnotes and detailed bibliography. There are also some writing errors that might be corrected if it is ever reprinted. For example, the title of Harold Greenlee's book on page 22, footnote 11, is cited as Introduction to the New Testament Textual Criticism. The should be omitted. The chapter headings are also confused from chapter 3 forward. So we read chapter 2 on page 53, chapter 3 on page 66, chapter 4 on page 75. Conclusion. As noted earlier, text criticism is an issue of emerging significance among traditional and Reformed Christians. The proliferation of modern translations has led many people to ponder not merely the translation philosophy that undergirds such translations, but also the original language texts upon which they are based. Unfortunately, Johnson's work does not demonstrate a firm and reliable grasp of all the historical, factual, and doctrinal issues that are involved in textual study of the New Testament. Here ends this review. You can receive audiobook reviews and notes like this one, Word Magazine podcasts, and sermons by subscribing to Christ Reformed Baptist Church's sermon audio feed on iTunes by searching for Christ Reformed Baptist Church. For video material, you can subscribe to the Word Magazine channel on youtube.com. You can also find written book reviews, book notes, and articles on my blog, jeffriddle.net, and you can follow me on Twitter at Riddle1689.